Thank you very much for the very generous introduction. I wasn't sure that you were introducing me because some of the things that you were saying, I don't remember. I don't remember doing them. But it's a great pleasure to be here this morning. I was here yesterday as well at the opening ceremony. To be among very important colleagues. Literally, you are the ones who hold the pen, and you are the memory of our democracies. Often not given the right honors that you deserve. I think yesterday we heard the remarks from the minority leader and the speaker. As well, we heard from the former editor of debates how important your role is. If you are not seated, Parliament cannot proceed in the work that it needs to do. Before I go to my presentation, I just want to emphasize that we are meeting at a time of great significance, I believe, for our democracies. At a time when parliaments and our various leaders are coming under very, very severe scrutiny by the people that they lead. And at a time when there is a lot of, changing dynamics, if you like, in the political landscape in many countries. In this country, we just came out of a hung parliament that I believe you have heard over and over. And during that period, the importance of the Hansard and the records in parliament and every word that was said was followed very carefully. And you heard yesterday from the minority leader how the records were used at the Supreme Court for a landmark decision towards the end of our last parliament. And at a time of significant digital, I don't know whether it's evolution, maybe the professor can help me with a better word in terms of, because the speed that we are witnessing sometimes difficult to describe. And the digital world refuses to wait. So you have to catch up. And that is why this conversation is very important, looking at the Hansard in a digital world. I am going to, can we go to the next slide? Oh, sorry. I'm going to do a few things, and I'll try and do them very, very quickly. So this is what I plan to do. When I was asked to present on this topic, the editor asked if I wanted to rephrase the topic, but I thought that I should stay within that, but rather perhaps rephrase or try to frame my thoughts based on the work that we do as CSOs. As the MC mentioned, I've done work in many countries, including most of the countries that are here. I've been to some of your parliaments, and I've done work in those parliaments. And when you think about the challenges that we face, the challenges that democracy faces, and the fact that the Hansard is what gives us a glimpse of what really happens in most of our parliaments, I think it becomes very important that we take the Hansard very, very seriously. It's, as has been said by the former editor of Debates, I think it's more than a transcript. The Hansard is more than a transcript. I think it's a pillar, I would describe it, a pillar of our democracy and a tool for accountability, and increasingly for researchers and those of us in CSOs, I think it's a very important document, as the professor has indicated. So in my framing this, I was thinking of the fact that I think we have a very, very big black hole that I described, in the sense that whilst the Hansard provides reliable and accurate record of what happens in Parliament, there is a big gap in the sense that in most of our countries, I believe most of the countries represented here, when the Right Honourable Speaker says all those in favor say aye, I think it's just simply a voice vote. So we don't know how our MPs vote. So they say the ayes have it. So what is the thinking of all those in the ayes? And in the absence of that, I think the Hansard, the records, gives us an indication of the thinking, the debates, the conversations that go on before we get to the point where the Right Honourable Speaker says, all those in favor say aye, and so on. So that's why I think the Hansard is very, very important in I believe in filling this black hole, so that it gives us a glimpse of who really our MPs represent, whether they represent our interest or they represent some other interests. Because over time, when you look at the Hansard, I believe you can get a sense, as the professor said, if you do longitudinal studies, you can follow and see the orientation of our representatives and so on. So it reveals the debates, the arguments, the motivations, and it gives us a very important tool. You want to hold your MP accountable. In this country, in the last parliament, we had a very topical issue. I believe in most of your countries, because I know in Kenya and other places is the same. The issue of who supports and who doesn't support a bill in Parliament on legislating against the LGBTQ. Most MPs in private will tell you we don't support this. In public, they say something else. The records of the conversations, particularly now that the Hansard, I think in this country, we have official reporters at the level of the committee, where you record the conversations and the thinking of our MPs. I think it provides for CSOs and for researchers a very important tool that we can use to hold our MPs accountable. And very importantly, I think this has been said already, is a very important tool for transparency and accountability. So I call the CSOs and the researchers, I call ourselves the fifth estate. We know the media is the fourth estate. Nobody has given us a name, but I have decided to give us the name that we are the fifth estate because of the important work that we do. sometimes I think we do a better job at holding the government to account than the media, especially when the media is very politicized. A few weeks ago, I was talking to the Parliamentary Press Corps, and I showed them a picture of 14 journalists in this country who are currently serving in our government. And I asked them for their thoughts on what that means for media trust. If all of a sudden you are the one holding the government to account or pretending to, and then the next moment you are serving in a government that has won power, I mean, what does that tell people about the work that you do or the work that your colleagues do? So we are the fifth estate, and I think that the work that we do, the Hansard helps us in addressing a number of critical questions, including whether our MPs are fulfilling their campaign promises. Because they stand on the campaign platform and they say one thing, they get into parliament, and during deliberations they say other things. The laws that they passed are the laws in the public interest. In the absence of their voting records, I think the only place where we can get some information is the Hansard. Is parliamentary discourse improving over time or deteriorating? And are records improving over time or deteriorating? Yesterday, the Right Honourable Speaker in this room said when he was writing his memoirs, he took the Hansard from 1993. And when you looked at what was recorded then as compared to what is recorded today, I think there's been some significant improvement. But I think beyond that is even the quality of debate and the quality of the conversations. And that the only place where we can find this, I think, is in the records that you keep. And critically, who really holds influence in our legislative processes? Is it us, the citizens that the MPs represent, or is it some party interest or some imperial president or prime minister and so on? And I think most of this we can get a glimpse from the Hansard. So now getting to the real question of how a digital Hansard helps civil society organizations and the research group, the academic group, in terms of the work that we do. The first one, I have 6 of them. The first one, I believe, is some of what has been said already. Tracking promises versus action. Tracking promises versus action. When people are on campaign platforms or when people are in power or in a position, do they maintain the same kind of platform of this or the same stance? In my thinking and looking at the situation that we have, particularly in most of our countries, I always say that we don't have an agreement on what truth is, and we don't have an agreement on the rules that govern all of us. So you see, the way the rules are interpreted depends on whether one is in power or one is in opposition. Recently in this country, we had a very contentious issue that the Right Honourable Speaker and the Minority Leader referred to yesterday about, taking away some members of parliament from parliament because of what our constitution says. And the constitution is as clear as it can be, to the extent that some people say even if you give it to primary school children and they read it, they can understand what those clauses mean. But here in this country, we're told that, those were not the meanings. And it was very interesting that those who were in opposition were on one side and those who were in government were on the other side in terms of trying to tell us what the meaning of those rules are. And we have seen many instances when members of parliament will say one thing when they are in opposition and then say another thing as soon as the tables turn. And the Hansard, I think, is one that would give us a hint and can help us at least to question our members of parliament and to hold them to account. Monitoring, accountability and integrity. I think just following from this, through the Hansard, we are able to, as watchdog groups, as a fifth estate, we are able to observe the voting patterns, even if we cannot see exactly how everybody, where people stand. At least through the Hansard, we can see the pattern and identify potential corruption, or on a more positive note, we can also highlight the MPs who are holding government to account, because often I think we tend to rely too much on the negative. And then long-term research. I think the professor has spoken extensively about this, so I will not belabor the point. The Hansard is also a tool that can help investigative journalism. Fact-checking. Members of parliament would get up on the floor of the House and say all kinds of things, sometimes not rooted in any fact. And I think in many places, for instance, in the UK, the BBC and investigative journalists have used data from the Hansard to be able to hold ministers and government officials accountable for what they say. And it also advances legal and rights advocacy. I think there are examples in many places. In India, for instance, if you look at the literature, I think Hansard records have been used to argue cases in court and so on. And we had, even in this country, even though yesterday the Right Honourable Speaker disagreed with the minority leader when he said, we use a Hansard, the Supreme Court relied on the Hansard, and the Right Honourable Speaker said that document that the Supreme Court used was not the Hansard because it had not been officially verified and approved by Parliament. But I think in many places, the Hansard has come through as a very important legal document that can be used in court to advance arguments or otherwise. I think the last one is civic education. The Hansard, in many places, in a country that I'm very familiar with, in Canada, young people use the Hansard to simulate debates using real excerpts from the records of the House of Commons. And this kind of civic education is very important because it builds a pipeline of future leaders who understand what it means to govern responsibly. Here I talk about the power of digital access. What does it mean when the Hansard is in a digital form for those of us who are in civil society and academia? The editor of debates is here. We've been doing some work for the Right Honourable Speaker, and it's always a struggle. You go to the records and you have to pass through a lot of people. Sometimes we have to call him, to pull out some of the records, some of them in hard copy, and so on and so forth. And when I was reflecting on this, I told myself, if everything is in digital form, it democratizes information access. So we can everybody can have equal access to the Hansard at any point in time, 24 hours, 7 days a week. Related to that, it removes the bureaucratic barriers that maybe researchers, so the professor says, the editor of debates is a very good friend. He calls him and then he helps him to get the information and so on. So how about if he didn't have the friendship with the editor of debates? You have to go through a lot of hoops to be able to access some of these records. Just similar to, it reminds me of the freedom of information laws that we have in most of our countries. The laws are there, but sometimes accessing the information becomes very problematic. There are a lot of gatekeepers, there are a lot of bureaucratic barriers and so on. If the Hansard is in digital form, this challenge is gone completely. So this is how a digital Hansard would help us. And it reduces research costs. Without a doubt, I believe the professor can say this, and even for us, some of what is digitalized now in our Hansard, we can sit in the comfort of our office and access information that we need about deliberations in Parliament. And for researchers and even CSOs, it enables issue specialization. So if you are interested in debates or issues about health or education, I think if we have a digital Hansard, it helps. You can do a very quick search using the digital tools that are available to us. And then I think it also fosters cross-border collaboration and research. So the professor sitting here, or we civil society organizations, we have partners in different places. If you are looking at a document that, in real time, your colleagues in other places can also have access to, and you can all look at those documents at the same time, I think it fosters a lot of cross-border collaboration. So some of my final thoughts. You are the custodians of democratic memory in most of our countries, and I think I said this at the beginning. You are enablers of accountability, you are guardians of transparency, and you are very important partners in nation building. You need to invest in timely, searchable, and accessible Hansards. I think that is very important for all the countries that are represented here because of the important role that you play. You are not just record keepers. I think for me, you are democracy builders. And you want to also ensure that records empower citizens and researchers. And finally, you want to ensure that your work fuels transparency and nation building. So on that note, I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share these brief remarks.